I recently did a video that went over quite well on low-income living tips, and I was asked to share more frugal living with the family tips. So I thought we would do that today. In this video, I have filmed a homestead and homemaking day in the life. I've got some juicy frugal living grocery and food tips. I'm answering a very popular question from the last video on how we got our stove on a low income. I'm also going to answer the question of how we bought our first home on a low income. And with that, I'm going to share kind of a hard chapter from our family's story. There are chapters, and in the first chapter, I'm going to share what always gets me through the hardest times. I hope you'll stick around to the end, because if you're low income, I think you'll get some use out of these frugal living with a family tips that I have for you in this video. In this scene, I am getting ready to do my devotions. If you're low income, having a firm footing on Christ can really help you maintain positivity and perspective through the rough times. I don't like turning a bunch of lights on first thing in the morning so that I can read. I like to do my devotions on my phone because it's bright and I can read things on my phone without having to turn a bunch of lights on. You're going to laugh about this. The current plan I'm working on is called You Are Not Behind. And here's the funny thing. It says I've got 5 missed days. Things like that really make me laugh. Anybody else out there love morning devotions? I went through whole seasons where when my babies were little, the instant I would wake up, they would wake up. And of course, they would want food. They would cry if I didn't feed them right away. So I had to get really creative about doing devotions through those seasons and fit them in whenever I could through the day. I've heard so many preachers say, you need to do your devotions very first thing in the morning. And I always want to say right back at them, you don't have little babies to take care of, do you? Well, I am here to tell you, Mama, when you're raising little kids, if you are raising Christian children, you are in the front lines of ministry. Never underestimate the fact that God is right there with you. It might not feel like it sometimes, but if you are a praying, faithful mama, He is. So you just get those devotions in when you can squeeze them in the day, and they will help sustain you through the hard work of raising children and financial stress. Frugal living tip here. There are a lot of apps that are wonderful for devotions, but a lot of them require you to pay for them. They might be wonderful. I would not know. I have the YouVersion app though. It is free and I absolutely love it. It has so many plans. Whatever you're struggling with in your life, let's say you're dealing with depression because you are very frugally living and it's hard. There's plans for that to help uplift your spirits and help you.
Nothing below, nothing above. No matter how low I get, Lord, you are enough. Nothing can separate me from your love. Nothing can separate me from your love. Lord, you are King of kings. I'm here to give you everything. It's my whole life that I am offering. I give it over to the King of Kings. I give it over to the King of Kings.
If you're trying to do frugal living with a family, get one of those grocery apps, put into your cart how much you're spending. Only fill it with the pre-made stuff that you normally buy and look and see how much that costs in your spending. And then take it out of your cart and put everything in to see how much it would cost to make all of those things from scratch. And remember that when you're cooking from scratch, you're not just getting the dish or whatever it is you're buying one time. You're getting it multiple times. I did this with bread. I found out that our family, which is, granted, larger, we save around $200 a month by me making my own bread. Some people, they don't get it. They're like, well, you sure have a lot of time on your hands. No, actually, I just know how to use my time. Growing up, my stepdad used to have a saying, time is money. As a homemaker, there are so many ways you can use your time wisely instead of foolishly to save so much money. Frugal living tip is to cook as much as you can from scratch, and it takes time to learn how to do this if you are just beginning or if you're trying to do this and homeschool or work from home. I encourage you not to give up though, because eventually you do find a rhythm. By the way, see this ground turkey in these packages? It tastes much better than the ground turkey and the rolls, like 1,000 times better. And it's a great, more affordable substitute for ground beef. Lately, the Lord has reminded me how hard it is to balance homemaking, working from home, and homeschooling while learning how to cook from scratch. Talk about frugal living. Our grocery bill just went up about $300 a month. One of our children was just diagnosed with multiple food allergies for the second time. This time, he may not grow out of them, they said. Thankfully, they're not life-threatening, but my goodness, we have been having to learn a whole new way to cook. It sure has been a learning curve, figuring out how to cook for him and teaching him how to cook for himself. He is a young adult and he has been doing his very best to pick up the load and learn how to cook meals for himself. But some of the things are kind of challenging to learn how to make, even for me as a seasoned cook. And the amount of label reading that is required is just quite time consuming. It has reminded me to have empathy and sympathy for people that are just learning how to cook from scratch, because there are a lot of things that we are having to learn how to make from scratch now that are a bit challenging. But I know from my past experience that this will pass. We will get into a rhythm. We'll get it figured out. It's going to be okay. In the meantime, Azure Standard has been one of our go-tos for the allergy-free items that he can have. I don't know what we would do without Azure Standard. Speaking of which, they did give me a 15% off code for new members. So if you are looking for an affordable place to get healthy groceries and home goods, look in the description box below. I will have all the information for you there. Really quickly, let me tell you what's happening in these scenes. Do you need a frugal but tasty lunch idea? Cabbage. Cabbage is so filling, and there are so many things you can do with cabbage. So in this scene, I'm making spring rolls. These are so tasty and so filling. They're packed with vegetables and they really hit the spot. I'm gonna try to get the recipe up on the blog for you. So look in the comment section below for that, for when I do get that done for you. I have more frugal living tips for you in a moment, but first I have a special announcement. It's getting to be that time of the year where we need some lights to help cheer things up. I have a special surprise for you guys, something I've been working really hard on getting up extra early to complete. I know how crazy busy the holidays are for most mothers, so what I've done is I have made a menu plan for the whole month of December for you, and it's a super easy menu plan to follow. I created it with working moms and homeschool moms and just very busy moms in general in mind. Some of the recipes are ones that you can make and then make two of, one for the night you're eating or the day you're eating, and then one for the freezer. This menu plan is created also with budget-friendly meals in mind. I have a whole page dedicated to budget meal tips and tricks. Another thing that I've done is I've made shopping lists. So this is a lot more elaborate than my last menu plan. The last menu plan was a harvest-inspired menu plan, and it's the first menu plan that I have created to sell. This one is a lot more elaborate. This one has the full week menu and then the shopping list for that week. There's also a master shopping list if you just want to go get it all done at the same time. There are bonus shopping list pages, and there is a bonus recipe sheet as well for you to use and print as you need. And if you don't want to have to plan Christmas dinner, I've done it for you. I created a huge Christmas menu plan. You can make everything on the list, or you can just choose what you want to make from the list. If you're anything like me, you like to plan and prepare in advance. So for that reason, this menu plan is available early. It is up and running in my shop right now. Okay, really quick, after I filmed this, I went and I added to the Christmas list, so you could actually use it for Thanksgiving. You could use it for New Year's, any holiday, and it's customizable. After my last video, I've had some really good questions roll in. I've had multiple questions on how we were able to afford our stove on a low income, which is funny because it makes me wonder how much people think this stove actually costs. Some of the stoves that look like this are like $20,000. Okay, this is not one of those stoves. This stove is a Z-Line, and if you want to know how I got it, there's a long story that actually I'm gonna have to start back 20 years ago. It's also gonna answer another question that I got though on how we were able to get a home on a low income. I want to tell you my story now, our story, how we were able to get our first home. My husband and I were raised to have nothing to do with banking systems. We were about 25 when we got married. The home that we were living in was one that the people that owned the home were not even charging us rent. They were letting us live there rent-free, which was so amazing. But one of the reasons they were letting us live there rent-free is because if they were to charge us rent, there would have been a whole bunch of repairs they would have had to do to the home. So long story short, the home was in disrepair. It was the kind of home that we actually would have snowdrifts at the doors when it would snow in the wintertime. And I mean snowdrifts inside the house, inside the door. So we would have to go plastic up all of the windows, all of the doors. So for about 5 months out of the year, I couldn't see out any of the windows because they were plasticked. There are also repairs that we would have to make on the home, knowing that it would never be our home, but they were just repairs that would have to be made, like the roof would have to be fixed at times. My husband was logging at the time and working as a farmhand. I had a little tincture making business. Suffice it to say, neither one of us were really getting anywhere very quickly, but we were working. Well, one year we were expecting our third child, and the house was so drafty that when the farmers would spray their fields with the glyphosate, it would get into our home. Well, it made us sick, and one year when I was expecting our third, we lost our baby after they sprayed. It was one of the most traumatic experiences of our lives. I was about halfway through the pregnancy. We learned later that this is actually a common thing. It happens often. After having dealt with the death of our little baby boy, I'm not sure we could have felt more like the whole world was just pushing us down because we were poor. Okay, now remember how earlier I told you we had been raised to have nothing to do with any banking systems. So it wasn't like we could even go to the bank. We didn't have credit. We had no collateral. So skip ahead about a year later, we were expecting our fourth child. We asked the farmer if he would just let us know. We explained that I was pregnant again. We let them know what had happened previously and that the sprays would always make us sick, and asked if he could let us know when he sprayed. Well, we were almost immediately evicted. I was 7 months pregnant. We were preparing to essentially be homeless. We were going to move across the country to move in with my brother until we could figure out what to do next. Before our scheduled departure, my husband and I noticed this very old, dilapidated bunkhouse. I kid you not. The windows had been broken in. It looked like a shack. I will see if I can get a picture to pop up here for you. Like raccoons and rats and wild animals had been living in it. We had no credit, so we couldn't get a home. We couldn't go get a loan for a home. We were desperate and destitute, and we had to be out of the current home we were in 2 weeks. My husband happened to know the owner of this old bunkhouse, and he went and he asked the man if we could start buying it in a rent-to-own owner contract system. The man said yes. This was one of our first breaks. We were beyond grateful just for this step. We were 30, and this felt like such a break. We had been giving up hope of ever even owning a home. It was not easy though. I do not know very many women who would move into a house previously occupied by wild animals. At 7 months pregnant, thankfully, we had a really good friend who helped us clean up the home. There was so much mouse dander, and being pregnant, I couldn't clean it up. So my husband and this very precious friend helped clean it all up. We still had so much work to do over the years in that home though. It was constantly one thing after another. It seemed like every year we would find more black mold that we had to eradicate, but the problem is we were never able to actually completely repair the areas where the mold was. So we were able to get it out, but then not put walls back up to fix them. Right now we are low income. Back then, we were living in poverty, and there just seemed to be no way out. And the house was very small too. It was less than 1,000 square feet. At one point, we went to a bank to see if we could get a loan just to put an addition on the home. And it was a hard no because my husband didn't make enough. Even though he was working 2 jobs, they were not high-paying jobs. You see, we lived in a low-income area and we had no collateral. At that point, we were 35. That's when I realized I needed to sell my goats, let go of all my homestead ventures and dreams, and use whatever spare time I could muster up for a part-time job. A year later, we decided to try again with another bank that had been recommended to us. And here's what happened. The manager knew my husband. He knew that he was good for his word and that he was a hard worker. He was actually related to my husband's boss, who my husband had a great relationship with. So because of my husband's hardworking reputation, he approved a loan for us. At that point, I was about to have my 5th child, and it was getting difficult to function with that many kids while homeschooling, cooking from scratch, and running a business all in such a small space. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. There were many, many tears of frustration through those years. But now we had another break, and there was hope. It was so hard to wait for that addition to get done. It was friends that helped us get an addition on our home and make some repairs. We were never able to finish it though. I'm going to skip ahead with some details here. We only lived in the home with the additions for 3 years before we ended up moving back to my hometown. We were able to sell the home with all of the flipping that we had done though, and make enough of a profit for a down payment. From there, essentially what we did is we found another home that needed quite a bit of fixing up and updating. The home we ended up finding next wasn't exactly turnkey. So the second home we ended up finding, we bought sight unseen, had tons and tons of issues, but literally we had no choices. I mean, we were coming from halfway across the country. We didn't have a ton of money to spend, so we were limited on our options. So we kind of took what we could get. And here's one of the situations we faced in that next home. There was this smell, and we knew it was coming from the rugs, but we couldn't take the rugs out for a whole month until the home sale closed, during which time a host of issues popped up, including several repairs that we needed to make on the home before even owning it in order for it to pass the appraisal. We ended up having to work really hard for a full month on this house just to make it get to a point to where it would appraise well. Some people were completely unsympathetic with our situation and were like, why don't you just get a different house? And there were no other homes in our price budget that we could get, so we didn't have much choice, or a choice really. The previous owners lived out of state. They were letting us have early occupancy too, so we felt like it was a good trade, but it was a very, very hard month, especially considering I had a newborn. So in this home there were these carpets and they smelled so bad. Eventually the appraisal happened. It did not go well. We didn't know again for like 2 days if we were going to be homeless or not and what we were going to do. It was such a stressful time. Everything ended up going through and we got the house. I ended up finding out from a neighbor what the smell was in the carpets. So the previous owner had a girlfriend whose nickname was the Duck Lady, and she would let her ducks in the house. I don't know if you guys have ever smelled ducks, but duck waste is one of the most awful smells in the animal waste world. Apparently, the previous owner also had a dog that he didn't take for walks. Got those carpets out, found out it had hardwood flooring underneath, which was absolutely stunning, and immediately upped the resale value without us having to do anything except remove the carpets and reveal the flooring. We loved that home. We took good care of it, made it beautiful. You can actually see it in some of my past videos. That home will always have a sweet spot in my heart. But you know, when you are born and raised in the country and your kids are born and raised in the country, it's hard to become city people. As hard as we tried, it just wasn't happening. So we started praying, and that is when the doors opened for us here at our present home that we are buying now, which is our dream home, aside from the fact that it's not finished, of course. Okay, so that answers the question of how we were able to afford our first and then our second home, which led us to where we are now. So essentially, it was in house flipping and being willing to live in homes and situations that were not what most people would consider ideal, and definitely a far cry from perfect. All right, so I know you're wondering, Shayla, you didn't tell us about the stove yet. How did you afford this stove? First off, I don't think the stove costs what you think it costs. This is one of the bottom of the line Z lines, and essentially after selling our townhouse, we had just enough left over for a good down payment and a few supplies to finish this home, plus a stove because the house didn't have a working one. We were initially paying about $2,000 for it, but we got it at a discount because they grossly messed up our order, so we got it for under that. It is a larger stove, which is what we really needed for our larger family, and this is about the price you would pay for any stove this size. Okay, I'm gonna share 2 ways for you to get a stove if you're on a low income, and something that you can do if you simply cannot afford a stove. We actually had a situation for 5 months. We did not have a stove. So I'm going to share how I cooked for our family without a stove. I am going to tell you something else. You see a pretty kitchen here. This is what I film the most because it is the most finished room in the house. What I am not showing you, although I have in a few videos, is the rest of my house, which is not finished. I'm also going to tell you there's a difference between poverty and low income. I am not saying that we are living in poverty. We're not. We do classify as low income though. Our stove was a little bit of a splurge, and in getting the stove, it meant we had to go without some other things that we would have liked to have gotten for the house. And that is the truth about low income living. We have also learned over the last 20 years that there are some things it is better to put more money into so that you're not replacing it soon. And that is what takes me back around to our stove bad history. We have always spent like around $600 on stoves in times past, and we have always had the absolute worst luck with stoves. Let me tell you, one of the reasons we wanted this stove, or just a big, nicer stove, is because, I kid you not, on a regular size stove, it takes me about 2 hours to do things like make pancakes for our larger family. And part of the reason for that is because the large size pans, I can only do 2 at a time on a regular size stove. So this stove is nice and big. First time I made pancakes on it, I was shocked. I didn't know I could make pancakes for my family in a half hour instead of 2 hours. When you have a bigger family, it's nice to have bigger sized industrial things. But another reason my husband wanted me to have an extra special stove, and the reason he got this for me, is because I have cooked for our family for, at that point, about 18 years. It's now been 20 years. And for those 18 years, we just always had the worst luck with stoves. We always got like the bottom of the line stoves. We did have a nice one for a couple years in there after we got our addition right before we sold our home, but I had it for less than 2 years. So for about 19 years, I have been cooking on stoves that always had issues. And being a bigger family mama that cooks from scratch on a budget, it's really hard to not have tools like a stove that work properly. The first one I had, it worked okay until we moved. Something happened to it in the move though, and for years it never worked right again, and we couldn't get a new one because we couldn't afford it. So I was always cooking on the stove, and every now and then it would just randomly burn dinner. The burner would go all funky and wonky, and it would be on a regular nice temperature, and then all of a sudden the temperature would just shoot up even if it was on low, and it would burn dinner. And then the second stove was really awful too. The burners would just shut off randomly. When it comes to appliances though, if you need a new appliance and you can't afford a new one or a used one, I mentioned this in the last low income video, but I'll mention it again for those that didn't see that. Always look for places that have financing, like 0% interest financing. And a lot of places will offer financing for like 12 months or 24 months. That's what we do for most of our appliances when we have to go get a new one because the current one failed. When we moved into this house, I was absolutely in love with our kitchen queen, and I still am. It's a wood stove though, and you don't want to have your wood stove in the house going in the summertime. There was not a working stove in this house when we moved in. For about 5 months, we were stoveless because we were so busy working on the house. You can look back and see some of the videos of what it used to be like. I've got a video of our move-in day, but we were so wrapped up in working on the house, and we also were trying to research a new stove, but our internet was spotty. We did not have good internet. So trying to research a good stove was difficult. It took us 5 months to finally find our stove. During that time, here is what we did, and this might be helpful to those of you who need a new stove but can't afford one right now. So we had a little toaster oven we cooked in, and those like $25 countertop burners. And so for 5 months, that's what I used for our family of 8 and guests as we had guests coming through. That was not fun at all, but it worked. So if you're low income and you don't have a stove and you need one, those Oster toaster ovens are amazing, and you can get countertop burner stoves. But now I don't recommend Z-Line. We've had a lot of problems with it. This is actually the second one. The first one was recalled twice. They fixed the issue with the first one, but then it was recalled again, in which they gave us the option to replace the stove. And they were very, very slow about fixing the problems. The first recall, the second one, they were very slow about getting the stove to us. So I have been out a stove for months at a time because of Z-Line. So I wouldn't recommend getting one of these. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found hope in it, as well as help. I could probably make another 1,000 videos just like this. So if you are interested in more low-income homemaking, please let me know in the comments below. Also, would you leave your frugal living with a family tips? I would love to hear what those of you have to say and tips that you have to share with me. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I'll see you next time.